The central plot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters involves 7 Millennium Items, magical items created in ancient Egypt that each have shared and unique powers. Anyone vaguely familiar with the series could probably point out that kid with the spiky hair wears a giant triangle for a necklace. That's the Millennium Puzzle, also known formerly as the Millennium Pendant. Those of you who have watched the anime know that each of the 3 main villains in the non-filler arcs have Millennium Item, Pegasus with the eye, Bakura with the ring, and Marek with the rod. Fans of Battle City may also recall an additional item playing a fairly big role during that arc, and that is the Millennium Talk, otherwise known as the Millennium Necklace, used by Ishizu. Then finally we have the Millennium Key and Millennium Scale, used by Shadi. And if you're not familiar with the original manga or the Toei adaptation of the anime, often referred to as Season 0, you're probably thinking, well, why is this video specific to the scale? The key doesn't appear much at all either. In fact, there are only 2 times it shows up during the NAS Gallop anime, which includes Duelist Kingdom onward. A, when Shadi uses the key to enter Yugi's mind after Yugi defeats Pegasus, and B, when Shadi uses it to send Yugi and his friends to the world of the Pharaoh's memories. The first instance is a reimagined and abridged version of the events in the original manga and Toei anime, where Shadi enters Yugi's mind the first time he meets him in order to figure out why Yugi has the Millennium Puzzle. But Shadi's involvement doesn't stop there. He goes on to further test Yugi to make sure he is the chosen one for the puzzle, and this test involves Shadi using the key to control the minds of a friend of Grandpa Moto as well as Taya, concocting a game in which Yugi needs to, and does, defeat Shadi in order to prove himself. So after the puzzle, the key is the second prominent Millennium item at work in the series. It functions as the test, the rite of passage, for Yugi from Shy Kid to the one chosen to release the Pharaoh and save the world from Zork. The scale, however, is a different story. In the manga, we see it twice. First, when in Shadi's first appearance, he uses it to judge and punish a greedy museum curator for defiling a tomb in the Valley of the Kings, and second is when Bobasa uses it to detect any evil present within Yugi's friends before they enter the Pharaoh's memories, at which point he kicks Bakura out of the group, having sensed the evil spirit of the ring. Apart from these instances, we don't see the scale in the manga and never see it in the anime other than its use in ancient Egypt. This sticks out to me because the other 6 each have their time in the spotlight. The puzzle and ring are the most important, the rod and the eye are used by main villains, and even the necklace and key are used in moments that drive the plot. But the scale is largely ignored. This then begs the question, was the Millennium Scale a missed opportunity? For a bit of context, let's quickly clarify what the scale does. The Millennium Scale has the power to weigh the good and evil of a person. In ancient Egypt, the wielder Karim also uses it to fuse monsters. On the surface, it makes sense that Shadi wields this item. While his motives are hard to discern, we can safely say that a major point of his existence is to determine who has and should have each of the items. The scale allows him to do exactly that. The problem though is that he never uses the scale for such a purpose, and the items choose their owners anyways. I'm thinking of doing a video on how exactly each of the items choose their owners, so if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments. So where exactly could the Millennium Scale have been incorporated to play a bigger role in the story? My suggestions will only work off the existing story without adding an additional arc or new characters, but I will provide recommendations related to each of the manga, anime, and spin-off continuities. My first recommendation would be to expand the Chosen One aspect of the story and make it the focal point of Season 0. Season 0 spends a grand total of 2 episodes on this point, with minimal contribution from the scale. The season overall is a rather disjointed collection of short stories that are threaded more by world building and Yugi's growing friendship with Janochi, Anzu, and Honda. If you're not familiar with the original manga, think of the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX where for around 20 to 30 episodes, Judai and friends go through a mishmash of adventures before we get a cohesive arc. Fittingly, this portion of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga is referred to as the school arc. To tie these adventures together, Shadi could have been the puppet master of it all, presiding over these various events in order to assess Yugi's chosenhood, if that's a word. Shadi would use the scale to find the hearts that were most evil or troubled, then use the key to redecorate their soul rooms into his puppets that could challenge Yugi to a barrage of games. This would include Kaiba, who given the amount of darkness in his heart, Shadi may believe to be the reincarnation of the one that once challenged the nameless pharaoh, and thus the true test for Yugi. After the pharaoh defeats Kaiba's blue eyes with Exodia, he mind crushes him, reversing any redecorating of the soul room that Shadi had done, and vanquishing the evil side of Kaiba. thus reenacting the events of the past where Atem freed Priest Seto from the control of the High Priest of Darkness. Involving Shadi to this extent makes further sense because Shadi, having been killed at this point, is fully aware that the evil spirit of the ring is on the loose. Thus, testing Yugi not only affirms his right to the puzzle, but his destiny as the one to overcome the spirit of the ring and Zork. My second recommendation relates to the Doma arc, or Waking the Dragons. If the power of the scale to weigh the good and evil of a person's heart sounds familiar, it's because the Orichalcos does a very similar thing. According to Raphael in his first duel against Yugi, the Orichalcos reveals the inner evil within a person. We later learned that in actuality, the Orichalcos is corrupting a person, but this isn't completely at odds with Raphael's claim. It's entirely possible that the Orichalcos only corrupts a person by amplifying the evil, however little, within them. The scale can work here as the opposing force to the Orichalcos. In my opinion, the real missed opportunity here is juxtaposing the Orichalcos versus the Millennium Items, and one way to do that would be to involve the scale. Upon losing Yugi's soul to the Orichalcos, Shadi appears with the scale, detecting traces of evil within the pharaoh, which is the lasting impact of having played the Seal of Orichalcos. Thus, the pharaoh's quest to vanquish his inner darkness is heightened because now the scale, and consequently the other Millennium Items, are at odds with the Orichalcos and will view the pharaoh as unworthy. After conquering his inner darkness, Shadi reappears and tests Atem's heart with the scale against the feather of Ma'at, thereby concluding with certainty that the evil in the pharaoh's heart has been vanquished. Shadi then grants the scale to the pharaoh, who uses it in the opposite manner of the Orichalcos. Instead of bringing out evil within people, the pharaoh uses the scale to detect the good in them, revealing the redeemable qualities within a soul and providing an avenue to free them from the corruptive chains of the Orichalcos. In short, whereas the Orichalcos amplifies a person's inner evil, the scale can amplify their inner good. This can extend to Raphael, Mai, and even Darts, who in the anime is redeemed at the end. In this recommendation, the pharaoh can also use the other power of the scale to fuse monsters in the final battle against the Leviathan. This allows the story to pit the evil magic of the Orichalcos versus the justice magic of the Millennium Scale. And finally, my third recommendation would be to have Yako, the lead villain of Yu-Gi-Oh! R, wield the scale. Quick context for those who aren't familiar with it, Yu-Gi-Oh! R follows manga canon taking place after Battle City. Yako is the adoptive son of Pegasus who wants to revive him using Teo's body as an avatar because he thinks Yugi killed Pegasus. In order to stop him, Yugi and company must duel through several card professors to get to Yako. The part that's a bit out there is that Yako isn't using any mystical power to revive Pegasus, it's purely a technological marvel. Even though the feasibility is demonstrated by the fact that Yako revives Bandit Keith, who is also killed in the manga, what I'm saying is that incorporating magic with technology would make much more narrative sense. Scale can play an additional role by aligning with Yako's objectives. To do so, the scale could work such that a soul or souls of any losers in a shadow game initiated by the scale could be placed on the right side of the scale, the soul of one other who had previously lost a shadow game could be placed on the left side, and the scale would then sacrifice the souls on the right in order to resurrect the one on the left if the scale was even. This would mean that the souls need to be equitable, and for this plot, I'd say Yugi's and Pegasus's fit the bill. There are two holdups with this recommendation though. First, the MO of the villain in R is basically the same as that of the villain in Duelist Kingdom, wherein you have this guy who wants to revive a loved one and needs to go through Yugi and Kaiba in order to do it. Giving Yako a Millennium Item to boot would then make it even more of a carbon copy of the Duelist Kingdom plot, but again, I feel that the magical aspect of the items is needed here. It's also fitting seeing as how it's now Pegasus trying to be revived, and Yako getting his hands on a Millennium Item is a fair possibility not only for his connection to Pegasus, but because of his skill at Duel Monsters and even the ability to create them like Pegasus did. The second holdup, and I can feel the more diehard fans screaming at me through the screen about this, and that is that Shadi says only 3 of the items represent evil. That's the Eye, Rod, and Ring, which happen to align with the 3 lead villains of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. The scale is instead one of the 3 that represent justice, so it wouldn't make sense for a villain to use it. This is perhaps exactly why the manga only had 3 lead villains. My argument here though is that all of the items were originally used by the priest of the pharaoh, and most of them were well intentioned. So it isn't too contradictory to go the other way and say that a villain would use a justice item in a less than well intentioned manner. Given the prominence of the other 6 items throughout the series, I'd say that the Millennium Scale was in fact a missed opportunity. While its powers as described in the story don't quite lend themselves to crafting an entire arc around it, it could have at least played a supplementary role like the necklace, or have its powers expanded as described in some of the recommendations. There are a number of ways the scale could have played a bigger role. Comment your own thoughts on how the scale could have been used, whether in existing arcs or an entirely new one. And be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video, lest your scales be unbalanced.